There is a photograph that most people never saw. It surfaced on a Dubai property forum in early 2025. It wasn't a marketing render. It wasn't a drone shot of an infinity pool at sunset. It was the underside of a villa on Palm Jumeirah, the concrete foundation where the island meets the sea. And what it showed was not what anyone was sold. Cracked render, visible rebar, waterlogged joints where the structure meets the water. The kind of deterioration you'd expect on a building that's been poorly maintained for 3 decades. These villas are not yet 20 years old. That photograph didn't go viral. It didn't make international headlines. It got buried in comment threads, dismissed as cherry-picked, written off as the work of disgruntled residents or rival developers. And the people who dismissed it the loudest? They were almost always the people with the most money tied up in the island. But here's the thing. The photograph was never really about one villa's concrete problems. It was a question. A bigger, harder question that nobody in the Palm Jumeirah ecosystem wants to sit with for too long. What happens when the world's most famous piece of real estate stops being a symbol of the future and starts being a liability with a waterfront address? That is what this video is about. To understand what's happening now, you need to understand what the Palm was at the moment it was conceived. Because it wasn't just ambitious, it was genuinely, almost recklessly, extraordinary. Not because of the luxury. Dubai already had luxury in 2001. 5-star hotels, private beaches, world-class malls. That wasn't new. What was new was the scale of the idea. No one had ever reclaimed that much land from open sea in a residential configuration. No one had attempted to engineer a functioning neighborhood, with roads, utilities, retail, and thousands of homes, on a man-made archipelago sitting in the middle of the Arabian Gulf. The Arabian Gulf, by the way, is not a friendly engineering environment. It's shallow, it's hot, it's hypersaline, and it's biologically active in ways that civil engineers and marine scientists still don't fully agree on. The sea in this part of the world is corrosive in ways that are measurably more aggressive than open ocean conditions. Nakheel, the state-linked developer behind the project, built it anyway. And when the first residents moved in, the world watched with a combination of awe, envy, and genuine disbelief. Property inquiries flooded in from Moscow, Manchester, Mumbai, Sydney. At the peak of the frenzy in 2007 and 2008, individual plots were changing hands at prices that had no rational anchor, other than the shared belief that the story would never stop appreciating. That belief was the product. Not the villa, not the view, the belief. The Palm wasn't just a place to live, it was proof that audacity could be monetized indefinitely. That a city-state with no natural resources beyond oil could will something into existence through sheer force of capital and ambition, and that the world would reward that will with its money. For a while, the numbers confirmed it. The story held. And then some. In 2022, the Palm recorded some of the highest individual residential transaction values in Dubai's history. A single penthouse sold for 302 million dirhams, roughly $82 million at the time. That number reverberated across global wealth media. It got picked up by every luxury real estate outlet, every wealth management publication, every aspirational Instagram account covering ultra-prime property. The Knight Frank Wealth Report of 2023 ranked the Palm among the top 5 ultra-prime residential addresses in the world. It appeared on every list of where the ultra-wealthy were parking capital. It was being mentioned in the same breath as Monaco, Mayfair, and the Upper East Side. The story was not just holding, it appeared to be accelerating. But here's something worth keeping in mind. When a story appears to be accelerating, that acceleration is sometimes the last visible sign before something stops. Not always, but often enough that it's worth paying attention to. And if you looked carefully at the data beneath the headline numbers, really looked, past the record-breaking penthouse sales and the Knight Frank rankings, you could start to see the divergence forming. According to data published by the Dubai Land Department and tracked independently by Property Monitor, average transaction prices on the Palm Jumeirah fronds, the residential fingers of the island, as distinct from the trunk and the crescent, peaked in mid-2023. And since then, they've shown a consistent pattern of softening. Now, to be precise, this is not a crash. It's not even a correction by the dramatic standards Dubai has seen before. The 2009 collapse, which we'll come back to, saw prices fall more than 60% in some corridors. This is nothing like that. Not yet. What it is, according to analysts at ValueStrat, is a divergence. The Palm is beginning to underperform comparable ultra-prime Dubai locations for the first time since 2012. On a price per square foot basis, properties in Dubai Hills Estate, parts of Jumeirah Bay Island, and several towers in the downtown corridor all showed stronger year-on-year growth in 2024 than the Palm's frond villas. The Palm is not collapsing. It is falling behind. And in a market where the entire value proposition rests on being ahead, on being the apex, the pinnacle, the most desirable address, falling behind is a different kind of problem than falling down. But price performance is almost the least important part of this story. Because underneath the price trends, there's a layer of data that is harder to spin: occupancy and usage data. A survey conducted by the community management platform Dubizzle Property in the fourth quarter of 2024 estimated that between 22 and 28% of Palm frond villas show consistent signs of non-occupancy. Not primary residences, not active short-term rentals, not visibly maintained at regular intervals. 25% vacancy on what was marketed as the most desirable address in the Middle East. That is not a symbol of prestige. That is a supply overhang problem dressed in marble. And then there's the infrastructure data, which adds another layer entirely. The TomTom Traffic Index has consistently ranked the Palm Jumeirah's main connection points, specifically the intersection around Palm West Beach and the Trunk Road, among the most congested in all of Dubai. Think about that for a second. A significant fraction of the island's units are sitting empty or underused, and the road network is still overwhelmed. What happens when occupancy actually fills up? The island was designed for a specific scale of habitation. It has been built and sold beyond that scale. The physical infrastructure cannot absorb full demand. This isn't a minor inconvenience. For a residential product that charges a significant premium partly on the basis of exclusivity and quality of life, sitting in gridlock to leave your own island every morning is a real erosion of that premium. And the newer alternatives don't have this problem. Developments like Jumeirah Bay Island and parts of the Dubai Hills corridor offer comparable or superior finishes, better road access, and none of the structural uncertainty we're about to get into, at similar, or in some cases lower price points. The Palm's competitive moat, the thing that justifies its premium over everything else, is narrowing, not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently, and in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Now let's talk about the physical structure itself, because this is the part that the real estate market has not yet fully priced, and it is the part that matters most to anyone with a long time horizon on this island. Palm Jumeirah was constructed using a technique called vibrocompaction. Sand dredged from the seafloor is sprayed into position and then mechanically compacted to achieve a density sufficient to build on. The technique itself was not new in 2001. What was new was the scale of application, and critically, the environment in which it was being used. The Arabian Gulf is corrosive. That's not a characterization. It's a measurable engineering reality. The combination of salt content, water temperature, and biological activity in the Gulf creates a degradation environment for concrete and steel that is significantly more aggressive than standard open ocean conditions. The American Society of Civil Engineers published a detailed technical review in 2019, noting that reinforced concrete structures in the Arabian Gulf degrade at a rate that requires active maintenance programs, typically beginning within 10 to 15 years of construction. Many Palm Jumeirah villas are now in exactly that window. And maintenance on a man-made island is not the same as maintenance in a conventional residential development. The fronds are surrounded by water on multiple sides. Substructure access requires marine equipment. The cost to properly inspect and remediate structural issues in frond-facing villas, according to engineering consultants familiar with the area who spoke to Gulf Business Journal in 2023, runs between 3 and 6 times the cost of equivalent repairs in a standard onshore development, 3 to 6 times. That cost is not falling on Nakheel. It is not falling on the Dubai government. It is falling on individual villa owners, many of whom are absentee, many of whom purchased the property as an investment vehicle rather than a home, and many of whom have been systematically incentivized by property managers to minimize maintenance spending in order to maximize short-term rental yields. The maintenance liability is privatized. The prestige was collective. The bill is individual. Here's the line that cuts through all of it. The Palm was engineered for a specific lifespan with a specific maintenance assumption built in. That assumption was that owners would be wealthy, present, and motivated to invest in ongoing upkeep. Instead, a significant fraction of the owner base has treated the Palm as a store of value, not a place of habitation. They are not present. They are not maintaining. And the sea does not wait. The impact of all this doesn't fall evenly. It never does. And the stratification here follows a pattern that anyone watching Dubai closely will recognize. At the very top, the ultra-wealthy buyers who paid $80 to $100 million or more for signature properties on the Crescent, the impact is currently negligible. These properties are staffed. They have professional maintenance programs. Some owners have already commissioned full structural surveys and undertaken preemptive remediation work. When you can afford a full-time estate manager and a team of specialists on call, the slow degradation of the man-made island around you is an inconvenience, not a financial threat. A handful of these owners have even spoken semi-publicly about the situation, treating it as an opportunity, a chance to acquire neighboring properties at softened prices, while everyone else is still pretending the problem doesn't exist. For them, this is an arbitrage opportunity. For everyone else, it's a different story. The middle layer is where the real exposure sits. The buyer who spent $2 to $5 million on a frond villa as a retirement plan, an investment property, a second home for seasonal visits. These are not people who can absorb a $400,000 structural remediation bill without material financial impact. They are often absentee owners who have been told by property managers that the asset is performing fine, when in reality, the maintenance has been deferred, the competitive position has softened, and the structural clock is ticking. They are now competing for tenants and buyers in a market where newer developments off the island offer more modern finishes, better road access, and zero structural uncertainty. At comparable or lower prices, their asset is no longer straightforwardly appreciating. It is carrying risk that was not disclosed at the time of purchase, because at the time of purchase, that risk did not yet fully exist. And then there's the third layer, the one that gets almost no coverage in the wealth reports or the investment seminars. Palm Jumeirah employs a significant workforce: maintenance staff, security personnel, hospitality workers, domestic workers. Many of them live in Dera, Bur Dubai, and the surrounding areas, commuting 45 minutes each way, sending remittances back to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, the Philippines. A property manager maintaining a villa for an absentee owner who hasn't received a salary increase since 2021, while his transport costs have risen 18% and his accommodation costs have risen 30%, according to CBRE residential market data from 2024. That person doesn't appear in the Knight Frank report. He doesn't get mentioned at the Geneva Investment Conference. But he is the one being asked to maintain a standard of performance on an island that is simultaneously asking him to absorb a cost of living crisis his employer hasn't adjusted for. When the island's economics come under pressure, his income is the first thing that disappears. Not through dramatic layoffs, through quiet attrition. Hours cut, contracts not renewed, agencies replaced with cheaper alternatives. The invisible labor that keeps the Palm looking presentable is the first casualty of a prestige product under cost pressure. There is a contradiction at the center of the Palm Jumeirah story that goes beyond engineering and beyond real estate cycles. And it's worth spending a moment on, because it explains a lot about why the problems we've been describing are so hard to solve. The island was designed to be permanent. Everything about it, the scale, the ambition, the marketing, was built on the premise of permanence. But every mechanism embedded in its ownership structure incentivizes impermanence. There are no permanent residency pathways in the UAE tied to property ownership. Buying a $10 million villa on the Palm does not give you citizenship. It does not give you the right to vote on how the island is governed, how maintenance standards are enforced, or how shared infrastructure is funded. What it gives you is a 10-year renewable visa, contingent on maintaining the investment and access to a community management framework that has consistently struggled to enforce maintenance standards uniformly across a fragmented ownership base spanning dozens of nationalities, each operating under different legal assumptions about property rights and obligations. This is not unique to the Palm. It's a feature of Dubai's broader residential model. But the Palm makes the contradiction visible in a way no other development quite does. The island requires collective, long-term maintenance investment to remain viable as an asset. The ownership structure produces perfectly rational individual incentives to minimize that investment, to extract short-term rental yield, defer costly repairs, and exit before the bill arrives. The gap between what the island needs and what the ownership structure provides has been closing in the wrong direction for several years. The engineering issues didn't create that gap. They just made it visible. In its 2024 assessment of Nakhil's parent entity, Nakhil Properties, Fitch Ratings noted that the company's revenue model had shifted substantially toward fee-based community management income and away from development income. That is a quiet but significant admission. It means the era of value creation through new construction on the Palm is effectively over. Nakhil is no longer building its way to growth on this island. It is now in what analysts call a harvesting phase, extracting income from existing assets rather than creating new ones. That's a defensible business model. Companies mature, revenue streams shift. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it is not a growth model. And in a city where the entire residential value proposition rests on the promise of continuous growth and appreciation, where the pitch has always been buy now, it will be worth more later, a harvesting model is a quiet admission that the growth phase on this particular island is behind us, not ahead. Step back from the Palm specifically for a moment and look at what this story represents at a broader level. Dubai built its entire identity around the idea that the impossible is possible, that you can dredge sand from a seabed and build a city on it, that you can engineer luxury from nothing, that ambition, capital, and execution can overcome geography, climate, and time. That idea was not wrong. Dubai proved it works. In the short to medium term, the Palm existed. The villas got built. The residents moved in. The record-breaking sales happened. The Knight Frank rankings were real. But infrastructure doesn't care about narratives. Steel in a corrosive sea corrodes on its own schedule. Sand that was compacted in 2003 behaves according to physics, not marketing. And a 20-year-old man-made island in the Arabian Gulf is going to need the same thing every other 20-year-old structure needs: serious, sustained, expensive maintenance. The question was never whether the bill would come. The question was always who would pay it, and whether the ownership structure could coordinate well enough to pay it in time. Right now, the answer to that question is unclear. And in real estate, unclear is expensive. After the 2009 collapse, when property prices fell more than 60% in some corridors, when entire construction projects were abandoned mid-build, when the scale of the over-leverage became impossible to ignore, Dubai did not fold. It restructured. It rebuilt. It diversified its residential sector into something more professionally managed and ultimately more resilient. That recovery was real. Even the Palm participated in it. By 2022, as we noted, it was posting record transaction values. The city's ability to reinvent itself under pressure is not fiction, it's documented history. But the 2009 crisis was a financial problem. Over-leveraged developers, overpriced inventory, a credit crunch. Financial problems have financial solutions. You restructure debt. You liquidate inventory. You recapitalize. You wait for demand to return. What the Palm is facing now is a different category of problem. It's an engineering problem compounded by an ownership structure problem compounded by a competitive positioning problem. None of those have simple financial solutions. You can't restructure your way out of corroding rebar. You can't recapitalize a fragmented ownership base into collective action. You can't wait for demand to return when the newer alternatives down the road are genuinely better products. Recovery is possible. A version of the story exists where a mandatory maintenance fund gets established, a government-backed remediation program gets launched, and the island reinvents itself with a more sustainable long-term model. That version is plausible. Dubai has the capital and the institutional will to execute something like that when it decides something matters enough. But that version is not currently visible in the policy signals or the market data. What is visible is a widening gap between narrative and reality. The Palm Jumeirah is not going to sink. Let's be clear about that. The engineering base is stable. The land is not going anywhere. The Burj Al Arab is still visible from the crescent. The restaurants are still open. The Instagram shots are still being taken every day. What is at risk is not the physical island. What is at risk is the premium. The valuation premium that justified every price paid for every property on its fronds over the last 15 years. A premium that was built entirely on a story of perpetual desirability, perpetual appreciation, perpetual prestige. That premium is the product that is degrading, slowly, unevenly, in ways that are difficult to photograph unless you know where to look and what you're looking for. The narrative says the Palm is the enduring apex of global real estate ambition. The data says it's a 20-year-old man-made island in a corrosive sea, with fragmented ownership, deferred maintenance, softening price performance, and a market that is beginning, quietly, carefully, to notice. The question for anyone with money in this market, or thinking about putting money into it, is which of those two things you're actually buying. Because they are not the same product. They never were. And the gap between them is not closing. If you own property on the Palm, or you've been considering it, I genuinely want to know how this analysis lands for you. Not rhetorically, these are real decisions, real money, and the lived experience of people on that island is more complex than any dataset can capture. Drop it in the comments. And if this is the kind of analysis you come here for, the kind that takes the most photographed real estate on Earth and asks what's actually holding it up, you know what to do. Subscribe, because we're just getting started.